at Greenwich Park, and I'm going clockwise. And I'm now 154 days, and I've hiked 3,341 miles with nature and an abundance of beautiful people. An average of a marathon a day, it works out. Yeah, because
Lindsay.
the total will be just over 7,000 miles. And the key
Lindsay.
thing to this is I don't walk, I don't use any ferries, so everything is on foot. And I can only cross a bridge over an estuary if it's got a public footpath on it, because some of them haven't. So, yeah, it's just incredible. I'm now in Scotland, and this is blowing my brain. The scenery is just phenomenal. It's beautiful. If you've never been to Scotland, people, please come. It's absolutely stunning. One, I absolutely love nature, and it makes me personally feel like a superhero, like I can be and do anything when I'm with it. It's my safe space and makes me feel like the best version I can possibly be. But two, I think at any point in anyone's lives, we need support with our mental health. I've had people in my life that have suffered from addiction, depression, eating disorders. And then when I lost a few people during COVID, that for me was being with nature, and seeing other people that I love dearly with nature and the positive impact that that has had on their lives.
Lindsay.
It's, for me, that's what this walk is all about.
Welcome back. You're watching Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview. A first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. But first, our top stories. There's been more rioting and violence by anti-immigration protesters, including in Rotherham, where a hotel housing asylum seekers was attacked and set on fire. The Prime Minister condemned what he called far-right thuggery and said perpetrators would face the full force of the law. And at the Olympics, the men's 100 metres final has been won by Noah Lyons by a margin of 5 thousandths of a second. You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. In the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with journalist and author Genelle Aldred and broadcaster and psychotherapist Lucy Beresford. But first, let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. And once again, the newspapers are dominated by the riots. Sir Keir Starmer's warning to rioters that they will face the full force of the law and will regret their actions is top story in the Eye after he promised to bring the people responsible to justice. This is The Guardian. You will regret this, Starmer warns rioters. Shame on you. The Metro echoes the Prime Minister's words, condemning the rioters on its front page. The Mirror pictures the latest violence with police fending off rioters and the headline, Under Siege. The Mail alleges that former English Defence League leader Tommy Robinson is helping stir the trouble from a beach holiday. The Financial Times says the Prime Minister's comments on the riots are the first big test for his government since it took power last month. And finally, The Star asks, 2 bees or not 2 bees? Where have our bumblebees disappeared to? Not easy for me to say. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by journalist and author Genelle Aldred and broadcaster and psychotherapist Lucy Beresford. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. Let's start with the story that we've been rolling on non-stop today, the riots that have been taking place across the country. We'll start with the Eye and Sir Keir Starmer pledging to bring the rioters to justice.
Yeah, I mean, I think we saw him. He seemed very strong. He seemed very sure. He spoke about what he did in 2011 when he was director of the CPS and how he dealt with the riots that were going on then, charging people, refusing people bail. This is all to the backdrop, though, and you know, I think we're hearing the right things, the backdrop of knowing that our prison service is creaking. So I think there's sometimes a bit of a question on how are they actually going to bring all of those people in at this point in time, because the numbers are swelling, and I think those people out there also know that there's a bit of a problem with the prison backlog. So really strong words, the kind of words we need to hear, but can there be action, not will, but can there be action to back them up?
Yes, I mean, he's saying that people will be dealt with swiftly and go through the criminal justice system, that the courts, similarly to 2011 when there were the riots in London, that they will run for as long as they need to bring these people before the law.
Yep, for as long as they need to, maybe 24 hours a day. And that is, in fact, what happened when Keir Starmer was working on these cases in 2011. I mean, the televised address was really important. It's been 5 or 6 days since the riots started, so one could say that this was, you know, almost the last time that he could have really spoken out. And I think it's very important that he talks about retribution as quickly as possible. But I think the key thing was him using the word far right and rioting. What's really interesting in the fact that this story is dominating the news coverage of every single front page is the way in which the language changes. So I can appreciate that when you're writing something, you don't necessarily want to use the same word over and over again. But the problem is that if you don't describe these people as rioters, if you describe them as protesters, as the FT does, if you call them demonstrators, they're not demonstrating, they're not protesting. They're going there with fireworks, they're going there with planks, they're going there. There've been footage of somebody with a fire extinguisher, throwing it at a door. So I think the language needs to be really important when you're talking about this incident, the sort of way in which the incidents are rippling out across the country. Call it out for what it is. And that was the key message, I think, that Keir Starmer wanted to get across in his televised statement. And
Genelle, a stark warning, as we see on the front page of The Guardian, you will regret this. Almost a guarantee from the Prime Minister that however you've taken part, even if you're not claiming to be a member of the far right, but you were there, you will pay for it.
Reminds me of my old headmaster, if you're there, you're involved, you know, and I think it is that thing of there will be people online driving, organising. You know, we see these things happen all the time, and WhatsApp, social media, X, formerly known as Twitter. People do band together. They're stirring up the hatred. They're organising where people should go. I saw someone sent me something on Instagram today of where there are dates for EDL protests across the country into the next couple of weeks in August. So there are clearly people behind this, not just the people out there who are throwing things and attacking the police and attacking places. There are other people behind saying, you go here, you go there. These people are travelling up and down the country. So I think there has to be a really clear consequence. And like you said, the language is so interesting. I was listening to the policeman on the show earlier kind of saying, well, when you start talking about riots, it has different kind of financial implications. And so that's why sometimes they use these phrasings. But I think it is important not to get these mixed up with protesters and demonstrators. You know, junior doctors are striking, they're protesting. That is not this. And we need to make that really clear distinction between what is a legal and lawful protest and what this is, which is something completely different on a different scale.
I think what was really interesting was the way in which Keir Starmer was really keen to emphasise that you don't have to have actually been the person that threw the fire extinguisher, that actually it's very much about were you amplifying things online or were you just the bystander? I mean, there are loads of photos on the front pages of people just standing there with their phones, wanting to bear witness, wanting to prove that they were there. And there's something very empowering about the group dynamic, the psychology of having other people around you. If it was just one lone person doing this, I mean, this would have fizzled out last Monday night, but it isn't. It's the way in which the group dynamic, the herd instinct, as has been talked about in other circumstances more recently, that is also amplifying this story. It's the way in which people feel emboldened because there are so many other people in the group.
Interesting that the Prime Minister spoke to those who might suffer the consequences of this writer's behaviour. He said that he pledged to those feeling frightened about being targeted because of their race or religion that this violent mob do not represent our country and we will bring them to justice. So speaking to those who were the victims of this.
And I think that's also really important because we also have to think, how do we move beyond this? So at some point, this will eventually be tackled or it will fizzle out. And what does cohesion look like once we get past this moment? What is it like for those people that are currently in that hotel where people have smashed the door in, people being pulled out of their cars, people being singled out and basically attacked and being beaten up by a group? When this is all over, all of that doesn't just go away, and we need the strong words on the courts and we need that kind of justice. But once that has happened, there are still going to be lots of people still very, very divided and divisive, and what happens next? And I think we also need to think about that, because I think what's happened with past times is we haven't sometimes thought beyond that bit of justice. But this sentiment has been simmering under the surface for a really long... This doesn't just happen in a vacuum. It's been simmering for a long time.
The tragedy of the three girls who were murdered and the children who've been injured, the grown-ups who've been injured, that was actually... that's been hijacked by people who have... Some people who have legitimate concerns about feeling unheard, feeling unsafe, feeling like they don't trust people in authority, feeling that there might be two-tier policing. This is the big phrase. But that, in turn, has also been hijacked by a much more far-right agenda, which has then been conflated with issues around immigration and integration. And we've got to be really careful that the people who really do feel that a lot of politicians don't hear them and don't hear some of their concerns, and we heard a lot about this during the election, and that was only 4 weeks ago, we need to make sure that they also feel safe, that they also feel heard.
The front page of the Metro, their headline, "Shame on you," and inside they're detailing the picture across the country, and that's really what's so shocking, that it's not an isolated incident. Blackpool, Sunderland, we reported on that. I remember that a police station was set on fire there. Hull, Leeds, Manchester, Nottingham, Liverpool. Genelle?
It's spreading all around, and this comes down to the organisation and being really strong on it's not just about the people who are there, because this kind of pattern of where it's happening and what's going on isn't by accident. And I do think there are some people really pulling the strings. There are some people who've thought this is our moment to capitalise something that's happened and to do this. But also you do worry and wonder about policing and how they're going to manage it if it keeps springing up in other areas, because you can't just clamp down on everything. I know people have talked about the army and different things and what would that look like, but it is really worrying. You know, it's not that I always feel unsafe going out of my house, because I don't, because I live in London and I must say I feel fairly safe. But I have to say, you know, I used to live in Sheffield. I grew up in Sheffield. We lived in Rotherham for about 3 months when I was younger. If I was living in that town now, would I feel safe just to be going to the shops? Because when you're pulling people out of the cars, as they detailed in the Metro, they're just pulling them based on skin colour. I was born in this country. They're not checking people's passports. They've no idea whether these people are born here, raised here, not born here, whether they're an immigrant or not. Not that that actually matters, but the fact is what's happening now is that on site they're looking at people and saying, you don't belong here.
Well, you know, one of the problems is also social media. So that's another aspect of the televised statement that Keir Starmer addressed, is it isn't just about the thugs who are doing these things and they need to to feel the full force of the law. But we're very imitative creatures as human beings. We learn about the world by copying other people. And when we see other people doing things, our instinct is to follow. That makes us feel safe. We're not. It's very hard to be the one that doesn't follow the crowd. And one of the reasons why we've got such a widespread ripple effect of all of these copycat riots is because they're seeing the material on social media, and it is just literally whipping around the country. And as per the Daily Mail, it could even be being orchestrated by someone lying on his sun lounger, that actually you don't actually have to be on the ground. So there need to be some sanctions, I think, for people who aren't there, who are not on the ground, but who are perhaps fanning the flames, whether it's through videos, whether it's through TikTok, whether it's through sharing material on social media. All of that is contributing to the inflammatory situation we now found ourselves in.
Genelle, just about 30 seconds on this being the first big test for the Labour government. The FT is looking at it through that prism.
Yeah, I think coming in the first 100 days, something like this is the unexpected thing that you just can't quite account for. And something that's one of the commentary pieces, a sentence says, the far right may be a shrinking fringe, but its volatility sets a disruptive agenda until the mainstream majority is smarter about its own. And I think, can the Labour government get a narrative out there that is cohesive, that is unifying, that takes us beyond this? That's going to be the big test for them, to see if they can stop fanning the flames on this culture war and kind of pour a bit of cold water on it and dampen them down.
I think Starmer's old job is actually going to play to his strengths here. If there was ever going to be a crisis, this kind of one which needs a real rule of law could actually be the making of him.
OK, Lucy and Genelle, thank you very much for the moment. We can take a break. Coming up, the Mail claims that one of the men directing the riots from a sun lounger on a beach is former EDF leader Tommy Robinson. We'll discuss that when we come back. Do stay with us.
They've pushed the protesters further back here. There's around 200 or 300 still remaining.
I'm Dan Whitehead and I'm Sky News' West of England correspondent.
This van goes onto the streets of Plymouth 7 days a week, 365 days a year.
These facilities at the moment are a lifesaver. It's all we've got.
From fishing communities to bustling cities, we spend every day reporting from across the region, hearing from people who have real stories.
I'll have nowhere to live for about 3 or 4 months.
There are still people inside the properties here. They're coming from the epicentre of what is now a global health pandemic.
We were seeing and speaking to young women who were selling themselves right on the high street. It was desperately sad, and the fact it was happening right in the heart of this community. Before Brexit, these oysters were being exported to the EU, but the trade stopped overnight.
What's your feeling about the future then?
Blake might all be finished, I don't know.
Welcome back. You are watching the press preview. Still with me, journalist and author Genelle Aldred and broadcaster and psychotherapist Lucy Beresford. Let's have a look at the Mirror front page. And the photo there, they're zooming in on what happened in Rotherham today. And those were the scenes of people breaking and entering into the hotel where asylum seekers were housed. And, you know, just must have been absolutely terrifying for the people inside, but the police weren't able to stop them from gaining entry.
No, well, that's the really worrying thing, and I wonder whether that was due to the sheer weight of numbers. I mean, what you can see here is it looks like you're in a war zone, and you've even got a flag at the back, so it feels almost like the Crusades again. And what's, again, so remarkable is the way in which everyone is just standing there with their mobile phones, recording it, presumably uploading it, as if it's something to be proud of, as if throwing sticks and stones and other missiles at the police is something to be proud of. It's really, really shameful. And so many of these people could be identified. I mean, they look pretty clear on the front page of the Mirror. So, yep, one hopes that the full force of the law will really be coming round their way.
And that's what the police are saying, that there will be footage, there will be identifiable features on certain people, and if they're not arrested today, tonight, you know, in the coming days, they will get that knock on the front door.
And when you look at all of the front page pictures, it shows a pretty scary picture of where we're at the moment, because you look at that one, it does look like a scene from a movie. It doesn't quite look real, and I think that's the thing that is so terrifying about what's happening. And like you're saying, people just standing around filming, normalising it all. It does feel like we're under siege from a group of people, and we need to kind of get back control of this situation.
Let's move to the Mail and the suggestion that far-right activist Tommy Robinson has certainly fuelled some of these riots by information that he's put out on social media, saying that he was shared a series of fake stories over the weekend, including claims that Muslims had stabbed protesters in Staffordshire and attacked 3 women in Scotland. Meanwhile, he's suntanning himself on holiday.
Yeah, so again, this in itself is dangerous behaviour, and it needs to be one of the elements that is addressed when you're trying to show people that you are taking this particular episode seriously. If you want to clamp down on it, and if you want to give the impression that you're being fair, then actually you need people to feel that this kind of behaviour is being tackled. I suppose what's really tricky is that it is often about social media. And I'm not quite sure where those platforms are. In fact, they were only marched into Downing Street, I think it was about a week ago, to talk to various, I think it was maybe Lisa Nandy, talking about what their responsibility is for actually sharing this. They would always say, no, we're the host. Other critics would say, well, you're the publisher. It's somehow in the way that... In a broadcast environment, you would have to be scrupulous about your sources, about the material that you put out there. And the same ought to really go for social media companies.
I think social media's kind of evolved much more quickly than we've been able to catch up with it in terms of making laws, in terms of publishing things, misinformation, and purposefully publishing misinformation. And it seems so strange to me that we don't yet have... Yes, there's some of it on the social media platform, but actually there has to be personal responsibility on the person typing the actual words and putting them out there. I do think it's interesting. I mean, some might say the Daily Mail are also sometimes involved in saying some things that are probably not helpful to our social cohesion also. So I do think it's interesting that they too have kind of turned on Tommy Robinson. But I think it's just really interesting to note that a lot of the people out there throwing stuff and being out there and doing a lot of this violent thuggery, the people that they would class as their leaders, they're not out there with them. And I think sometimes some of these people need to look around and think, who are the people that you're listening to? Where are they? They're not putting themselves on the line. They're not out there protesting with you. He's sunning himself in Cyprus. A lot of them are inside pulling the strings. They don't want to put themselves in danger of being arrested. And I think some of these people out there should take a quick look at who their leaders are and think about whether they're worth following.
Although, funny enough, I think some people think, oh, actually, while this kind of person is away, actually, I can now step up and I'm like the de facto leader. So I think there is a danger that in a vacuum, if you are spending too much time on your sun lounger, that actually other people might try and steal your thunder.
Lucy and Genelle, thank you very much for taking us through the papers. We'll see you in the 11 o'clock hour. In the meantime, let's take a look at the weather for you. Well, there'll be spells of wind and rain this week, but the south will be largely fine, especially the southeast. Many places will have a dry start to the day, but the north and west will see rain, heavy and prolonged over Western Ireland and Western Scotland. Localised flooding is possible there. England and Wales will stay mainly dry through the morning, with sunny spells developing, but some western parts will be dull and damp. Elsewhere, there'll be outbreaks of rain, locally heavy, but Ireland and Northern Ireland will dry up from the west later on. It'll be warmer and more humid than today. The afternoon will see rain edging into Wales and Western England, allowing Ireland, Northern Ireland and northwest Scotland to brighten up. Tuesday will see rain spreading eastwards across England, which will be slow to clear the muggy southeast. Coming up next on Sky News at 11, we'll have the latest on another day of unrest across England.